The smartest man in the universe never used the strongest metal on Earth, which stands as a major paradox in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Tony Stark built 50 distinct suits of armor, ranging from scrap metal in a cave to nanotechnology capable of bleeding a Titan. Yet he never made a single one from vibranium. He certainly knew about the metal and understood that Captain America's shield was indestructible. He even possessed the resources to locate it. His decision to stick with gold-titanium alloys over Wakanda's metal involves more than just supply issues. It points to specific details about Tony Stark's ego, his engineering philosophy, and a fatal flaw in vibranium that only he understood.
The most obvious reason involves simple scarcity. Vibranium remained a ghost story for most of Tony's life. His father, Howard Stark, used the entire U.S. military vibranium reserve in the 1940s to create Captain America's shield. Howard explicitly stated that it was the rarest metal on Earth. Tony grew up hearing these stories and believing the metal was effectively extinct. He did not know Wakanda hid a mountain of the material behind a holographic rainforest. Vibranium looked less like a mineable resource and more like a museum artifact to him. Mass-producing Legionnaires or iterating through 50 armor designs is impossible using a material that does not exist on the open market. That situation changed in 2015 with the Age of Ultron, when Tony finally got close to the source. Ultron escaped into the internet and raided Ulysses Claw's stockpile, which contained the only major amount of vibranium outside Wakanda. Tony tracked the metal, but never recovered it for his own armor. He watched Ultron use the supply to build Vision and his final meteor machine instead. The vibranium was either destroyed, lost in the city's debris, or walking around as Vision by the time the dust settled in Sokovia. Tony never secured a shipment because he was too busy cleaning up his own mess to scavenge for metal. A major misconception suggests that Tony created vibranium in Iron Man 2. This theory persists because the movie novelization explicitly called his new element vibranium, but the films retconned this immediately. The element Tony synthesized in his basement was a brand new clean energy source based on the Tesseract's space stone structure rather than vibranium. The events of Black Panther would make no sense if Tony had synthesized the metal himself. Vibranium is a metal mined from a meteorite, while the new element was an energy core. Tony fixed his heart without fixing his armor's durability problem, since he continued using gold-titanium alloys instead of Wakandan tech. This topic originated from a debate in the comments section, so thank you to everyone keeping the Marvel lore alive. Please share any what-if scenarios you want covered next. Hitting that subscribe button helps produce more videos like this one. We can now return to Stark Industries. Tony Stark worked as an engineer rather than a warrior, using a method of rapid iteration. He built the Mark II before crashing it, and then immediately built the Mark III. This philosophy is impossible with vibranium because molding the metal requires specialized sonic technology and stability that Tony lacked. Vibranium is extremely rigid and difficult to rework once it sets. Tony could not just melt down a failed design and start over in his garage. He needed materials he could manipulate easily. Gold-titanium alloy was strong and workable. Tony requires a suit he could upgrade every week over an indestructible one that was impossible to modify. Tony had already moved past the need for heavy plating by the time he might have accessed Wakandan resources after Civil War. He was developing the Mark 50 bleeding-edge nanotechnology, which represented a complete philosophical shift. Vibranium acts as a shield, while nanotech functions as a multi-tool. A vibranium suit would have been a static shell that was good for taking a punch, but poor for adaptability. Nanotech allowed Tony to create shields, thrusters, battering rams, and medical sprays instantly. He traded raw durability for extreme versatility. A vibranium chest plate would not have helped him drop a Titan, but a nanotech suit capable of forming new weapons mid-fight gave him a real chance. Tony might have avoided vibranium,
because he knew its weakness. The metal is not truly indestructible, since sonic stabilizers can deactivate it and render the suits useless. Even Thanos' blade managed to shatter Captain America's shield with brute force. Tony Stark was a control freak who would never wear a suit with a specific off switch controlled by another nation's technology. Building a vibranium suit would make him reliant on Wakandan metallurgy. His armor would be at a disadvantage against sonic weaponry if he ever had to fight T'Challa. Tony only trusted what he built himself, using materials he fully understood. The Mark 85 armor Tony wore in Endgame has sparked debate among fans, who argue it must have been a vibranium alloy to survive a hit from the Power Stone. A close look at the damage reveals that the armor shatters and rebuilds when Thanos strikes. It behaves exactly like the refined gold titanium nanoparticles of the Mark 50. Pure vibranium would have dented or crumpled, rather than dispersing like fluid. Wakanda was also in chaos without T'Challa during the 5-year blip, making it unlikely they opened their borders to ship tons of sacred metal to New York. Tony built the Mark 85 to channel energy from the Infinity Stones, which is not the primary function of vibranium. Political factors also played a role, since Tony Stark and T'Challa were allies, rather than best friends sharing trade secrets. Wakanda protects its resources aggressively and prepared for war in Wakanda Forever, just to prevent other nations from finding vibranium. T'Challa likely would have refused, even if Tony had asked. Giving a former weapons manufacturer with a history of creating robots like Ultron access to the most dangerous substance on Earth presented a major geopolitical risk. Wakanda trusted Tony to help save the world without trusting him with their most valuable asset. The risk of him reverse engineering or weaponizing the metal was simply too high. Marvel demonstrated exactly what happens when Tony acquires vibranium during Season 1 of What If. Killmonger saves Tony and brings him a vibranium ring, which Tony immediately analyzes and uses to power a drone army. He builds a weapon instead of a suit. This detail confirms that Tony's first instinct upon receiving the metal was to power more machines, rather than improve his armor. His engineering brain prioritized automation and power output over personal durability, even in an alternate reality. He viewed vibranium as a battery rather than a breastplate. This reinforces that his goals in the main timeline did not align with the properties of vibranium. Riri Williams provides another piece of evidence as Ironheart. She builds a bulky suit from scrap in Wakanda Forever, before constructing her Mark II armor with Wakandan assistance, using vibranium. She achieved what Tony never did because she was inside Wakanda, fighting for their nation, with Shuri's direct help. She received access without needing to steal or invent the material because she earned their trust. This contrast shows that a vibranium suit was always possible, but it required a relationship with Wakanda that Tony Stark never had the time to build before he died. A personal reason also influenced Tony Stark's choice. He was a narcissist regarding his creations and insisted that Stark tech represented his own invention and understanding. Using vibranium would admit that his own alloys were insufficient and force him to rely on a material he did not discover. Tony tries to prove throughout the MCU that human ingenuity is superior to magic, aliens, and ancient gods. Building a suit out of space metal would seem like cheating to a man who built a particle accelerator in his basement. He wanted to win with his brain, rather than just using the strongest rock. Physics also plays a role in this decision. Vibranium is lightweight, but has different mass properties than the gold titanium alloy used for Tony's flight stabilizers. His entire flight system was calibrated for the density and weight distribution of his own alloys. Switching to vibranium would have required re-engineering his entire flight physics model. Captain America's shield defies physics by bouncing around, so stabilizing a supersonic suit that absorbs kinetic energy instead of deflecting it would be difficult. The aerodynamic instability could prove catastrophic.
Changing the fundamental material might have made the suit fly worse for a man obsessed with performance, even if it offered better protection. Tony Stark had financial limits, despite his wealth. Vibranium is the most expensive substance on the planet, and Vision's body alone cost $3 billion worth of the material. Tony destroyed dozens of suits in Iron Man 3 and lost his entire armor in Infinity War. The cost would have been astronomical for Stark Industries if every one of those suits consisted of vibranium. A destroyed or lost vibranium suit also represents a large amount of strategic material falling into enemy hands. Leaving a gold titanium arm behind is dangerous, but leaving a vibranium arm for Hydra to find is a major global security risk. Tony's suits functioned as conduits for the Arc Reactor rather than just armor. His new element core provided a perfect energy source, and his gold titanium suits channeled that power into repulsor blasts. Vibranium absorbs and stores kinetic energy as its main property. This characteristic could cause problems for Iron Man. A suit that constantly absorbs the energy he tries to project could create feedback loops or reduce weapon efficiency. Black Panther's suit releases energy in bursts, while Iron Man needs a constant, directed flow for flight and beams. The two technologies appear incompatible on an energy level. Tony Stark's decision never to use vibranium improves his story. He fought gods, aliens, and super soldiers using standard Earth metals and his own brain. Captain America needed the shield, and Thor needed the hammer. But Tony Stark only needed a box of scraps. People would have credited the metal for his invincibility if he had built a vibranium suit. Snapping his fingers in Endgame while wearing a suit of his own design proved that the real superpower was the man inside the armor, rather than the material itself. Tony Stark's refusal to use vibranium serves as a character statement rather than a plot hole. It demonstrated that ingenuity is a stronger weapon than the strongest metal. He saved the universe on his own terms, without needing Wakanda's protection. Thank you for watching this analysis of MCU history. Subscribe to see the upcoming breakdown of why Captain America couldn't lift Mjolnir in Age of Ultron